loves. So today we are talking about how to heal from ghosting so that you can attract men who really actually choose you. And one thing we really want to acknowledge is that even though it's not supposed to hurt, ghosting really does hurt. And it doesn't happen for the reasons that you may think. Let's unpack what all of it really means so that we can understand why it cuts so deeply and how you can release it so that you don't have to carry the energy of it anymore. It's okay for you to admit, it hurt, I was ghosted and it hurt. It's okay for you to admit that to yourself. And let's actually just deal with that energy. You're not supposed to have to be stoic and pretend that it wasn't a big deal. If it hurt, right? And there are reasons why it does hurt. The pain we feel from ghosting is a legitimate psychological wound. And it's not just the rejection, it's that it feels like you weren't even worth a goodbye. You weren't even worth the time that it took to acknowledge and say goodbye. Sometimes we get really angry about it because it feels this isn't going to be a match. It's been really great getting to know you. Good luck. I feel like anybody should be able to say that and anyone should be able to hear and receive that. But that is unfortunately not the world we live in. So we can at least be in charge of how we respond to being ghosted. And we can take we can set an intention that we are not going to ghost other people because we don't want to create that energy. That's not the kind of energy that we want to move in. So, sometimes the most difficult thing about being ghosted is that lack of basic decency that we feel. Sometimes it's that we feel like we just don't have any answers. We don't know why they did it. We feel like it has to do with our worth in some way, but it's really not. So we're going to get into some of those things right now. So why does ghosting hurt so much? It hurts because, it triggers a lot of breakup wounds for us, and those wounds linger. It triggers the fear wound because we are afraid that it will happen again. We're thinking like, well, if this person disappears, what's to stop someone else from disappearing? Like what's going to happen with the next person, right? We can have an anger wound from it where we feel an intense amount of resentment because, how could someone just vanish without any explanation, right? We can feel a shame wound because we can start to blame ourselves for it. And we can say, was it something that I did? Is it because I'm not enough? Often what I find is the most wonderful, extraordinary women who I would definitely say, like, this woman is a catch for sure. Those women seem to have some of the deepest self-doubt and was it something I did? Am I not enough? Kinds of fears and doubts that come up after they've been ghosted. Sometimes it triggers a confusion wound because we didn't get that closure that we really needed to have. And that's one of the reasons that it can be so psychologically damaging, right? We just go around and around in our heads trying to figure out what it was because that's the natural response. We're like, I want to understand what happened so I can keep it from happening again. And that's the lie that we're sort of dealing with, is the idea that there is something you did that you cannot do next time, right? That would influence it. Another thing is that it can trigger the grief wound, right? It's all 5 breakup wounds that get triggered. And the grief wound is like you can be mourning what you hoped would happen because you could be like, it seemed like we were doing so well and it seemed like we were so good on paper and I thought that it had a lot of potential and I was really looking forward to seeing where this went, right? So you can grieve the future that you didn't get to have with this person. Hi, Belinda. How are you doing, love? I'm glad you're here. So that can be an issue, right? So ghosting can hurt because it feels like we weren't even worth the decency of saying goodbye. It feels like we were not even worth taking that time to say goodbye. But the truth is, it's not even about you. It's really not about you. one of the hardest parts about ghosting is how personal it feels. But the truth is that this person didn't actually take any time to get to know you. So if they didn't invest in seeing you and seeing your heart and seeing your humor and your brilliance and all of those things, then how can that have been about you? They didn't even get to know you. Like, you can't be rejected at your core by someone who didn't get to know your core, right? But we feel like it's really deeply personal. It just feels like that to us, right? So rejection, in terms of ghosting, it feels like rejection, but it isn't. You can't be rejected by somebody that doesn't actually know you, that didn't take the time to get to know you. And they can't reject the essence of who you are if they didn't stick around long enough to find out. So even though it feels very personal, it's not, but we want to address that it does feel personal, because we don't want to carry those wounds. We don't want to carry that explanation. We don't want to carry that energy with us. We want to remember that ghosting is not a reflection of our value. It's really not. Everybody gets ghosted, and it's really a reflection of the emotional immaturity of the other person, right? It's avoidance, it's a fear of honesty, and it's a good, if we look at it in the right way, it's actually kind of a good thing, because the person is self-selecting out. Like, they're showing us that they don't have the character to have honest communication. They're showing us that they don't have the courage to have a very brief, honest talk with someone, even like a text. They're showing us that they lack the ability to be emotionally mature, right? And so if we value those things in a partner, if we value honesty and emotional maturity, if we value those things, then we want to know right away. We want that information. Are you like this, or are you not? We want to have that information right away. So even though we don't really need to understand the reasons, sometimes we want to understand the reasons. Sometimes we just want a little bit of insight into why someone might have ghosted. So here are some of the really common reasons that someone might ghost you, right? Sometimes it's just avoidance, right? They just don't want the discomfort of having to say that they're not interested, right? Sometimes it's emotional immaturity. I would say most of the time it has to do with emotional immaturity, because it's either not having the skills to really communicate directly, or it's kind of not having the courage, right, to communicate directly. And that is a big part of emotional immaturity. People who are emotionally mature understand that they need to have some conversations, even if it's going to be difficult, right? I think it's Gay Hendricks who said I always blank when I'm trying to remember the name of this Gay Hendricks book. And it's funny because everybody had it like in the late 90s. It's the one where there's a fish in the fish bowl and the fish is jumping out. It might be called The Big Leap. That's probably what it's called now that I think of it. But anyway, there's a Gay Hendricks book, and in that book he says something, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, between you and freedom, there's like a 20-minute uncomfortable conversation that you need to have, right? That you don't want to have. So sometimes people just will do anything to avoid having that conversation. And that's not on you, right? That's on them. Sometimes people don't want to have to deal with confrontation. They don't want to have to deal with someone else's feelings about what they've done, right? They're not used to having to deal with the consequences of their actions, so they kind of sidestep them. That's another character revealing thing, right? Ghosting is really about a lack of character, really, really often. Sometimes it's that he has a different sexual agenda than you do, and he has discovered through the date that your timing is not going to fit his desires. You might be somebody who prefers to get to know someone and feel safe before they have sex, and he might be someone who thinks of sex much more casually, and so he can tell that you're not going to want to have sex when he is going to want to have sex, and he doesn't want to make the investment in getting to know you well enough to get to the point where you would end up being comfortable having sex. Sometimes you're dealing with somebody who's already involved and was just not honest about that with you. And so they kind of disappear because they weren't ever really available in the first place. Sometimes someone gets distracted or overwhelmed, right, with what's going on in their own life, and they just really don't have the bandwidth for a relationship, but they thought that they did. That doesn't really excuse the lack of, reaching out and being honest and saying, hey, I just don't think I'm going to actually be able to do this after all, right? It's still an emotional maturity thing, even if they legitimately don't have the bandwidth in their life to have a relationship. That's something that should be communicated, not something that should just be left unsaid. And sometimes, people just don't have the same values of like decency, right? Like someone might have one idea of what decency means, and and some people might have another idea of what it is. I remember my grandfather, when he was getting he went to get his license renewed, and he had to take the vision test, and because he couldn't see very well, they wouldn't renew his license, right? But they just sent it in a notification in the mail because it's the DMV. and the DMV doesn't care about you like that. And my grandfather was more upset about the fact that they didn't tell him to his face like a man than he was about not being able to drive. So decency means different things to different people. So, one of the most common things, and something to understand, is every one of these reasons we're talking about is about his capacity. It goes back to his capacity. None of them go back to your worth. And we're going to go over some reasons why it might be about you, but not maybe in the way that you think. So one of the most common things that I've seen is when people get ghosted because the man who they were dating has a different sexual agenda and a different sexual timeline than she does, right? I remember I got ghosted in my 20s by someone, and they told a friend of mine that he told my friend that the reason he didn't ask me to go out with him again, he said something like, well, I wanted to hook up. I didn't want to start a book club. And to me, I was kind of like, oh, I'm really glad that he said that, because what he was saying essentially was like, I'm not interested in like having an intellectual conversation with her. I just wanted to have sex with her. I was really glad that he told me that. And then he, I could tell from sort of like the next person that he got with that, yeah, he was very serious, that he just wanted to have sex. He was not interested in, like a relationship, and he found someone who had the same, goals for that he did. So that's great. Good for them. So here are some of the reasons why ghosting might be about you, but not in the way that you think that it might. So sometimes ghosting happens because of who you are, and it not in a way that makes you unworthy of love. It actually can mean the opposite. So, because you have to understand, anytime we're talking about someone who ghosts, that's a massive character flaw. That's not like, oh, it's a good person, but they just happen to ghost. It's a massive character flaw that tells you a lot about that person. And it's really like we dodged a bullet, essentially, when somebody ghosts. So sometimes you get ghosted because your standards were really clear. And, if the person realizes that you're not going to settle for breadcrumbs, then that might feel like too much effort for him. Again, that's something you want to know, right? That's good information. It's good for you to know that. It's good for you to find that out now. Because sometimes when we're dating, we forget that we're sorting and choosing. We're so kind of wrapped up in the mindset of being chosen that we sometimes forget that it's our job to choose. It's our job to take in the information clearly, keep our hearts still and keep our eyes open and make choices and remember our value. Sometimes we forget that, and it can be really, we can be really thrown, So another reason why you might be ghosted is because you carried yourself with self-respect, and you kind of signaled by that you wouldn't be tolerating games. So game players aren't going to want to continue with you. They can recognize that it's a waste of their time because you're not playing games. Sometimes it's that you want a really genuine connection and the other person is just after something very casual, you know, and they might have recognized that faster than you did. There is a thing in dating that is interesting to me, because often in dating, people think that they're supposed to go, well, women, a lot of women think that they're supposed to go from strangers to lovers, strangers to soulmates. So we sit across the table from somebody that we don't know and we look for reasons to fall in love with him, right? But really what we need to do is go from strangers to friends to lovers, right? Because of a lot of different things. We want to do that partly because we are not in sync sexually. So when we have sex, we release a flood of oxytocin, and it's a massive bonding hormone, and we feel a deep sense of empathy and connection to that person, to that man that we've had sex with. And when men have sex, they release a flood of dopamine. Dopamine is a feel-good hormone that just goes, woo, that was fantastic. It is not a bonding hormone. So really often that's something that makes us very much out of sync, because we might be thinking that he's a terrible person or something like that, you know, because he doesn't feel the same thing that we feel. And that's not the case. You know, men are not bad, or, you know, they're not villains for not bonding with you sexually at the same time that you bond with them. We just need to wait until we actually know them well enough that there is some of that bonding that's going on emotionally, and he is feeling some of that for us before we have sex. So that if we want it to be about more than sex, because otherwise what happens is we have sex too early, we bond, he doesn't, by, you know, not really through any fault of his own, and then we recognize that there's a disconnect, and we try to act like we're not as into him as we are, and that messes everything up because we can't be ourselves, and we are very anxious, and we're wondering all the time, what does it mean? Is the relationship going to happen? Like, does he care about me? Does he feel the same way? We're trying to build a scaffolding of a relationship because now we've already bonded with someone that we don't really actually know that well, you know. So there's a very high amount of anxiety. There's a very high amount of uncertainty, you know, and it's just it's a recipe for stress and for us to freak out and then not act like our normal regular selves and then seem like we're nuts when we're actually lovely people who would not normally be freaked out. So there's a really big, you know, part of that, of just like the progression, kind of like the organic developing of a connection between two people, that we often skip, and it's to our detriment, you know, to do that. And, you know, some people are like, well, I got needs and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, you're an adult. I'm not going to try to tell you, you know, do your thing. You know, I'm just telling you best practices, sis. Do whatever you're going to do. So anyway, I just want to make the point that ghosting is always about his character. It's always about his character, because an emotionally mature person, a person with integrity, a person with courage, a person who values women will not, he will communicate with you honestly, even if he is not interested, you know? And it's like, I've had plenty of clients who have dated somebody who ends up feeling like it's not a match, and he communicates with her that it's not a match in a way that leaves her still feeling cared for and doesn't make her feel like her value is diminished. It's just like, this wasn't a match. But it's been really wonderful getting to know you. I think that you're an amazing person, you know? So it's like, it is possible for a man to have an honest conversation with you about not being a match, about the two of you not being a match. And a good person, you know, a person with integrity and honesty can have that conversation and have it not be, and not act like it's the most difficult thing to ever happen on the face of the earth. It's really not. So, you know, it's important to remember, like, sometimes ghosting happens because you have standards that he couldn't meet, and he recognized that before you did, and it's not a rejection. It's him just revealing that he just was not capable of meeting those standards. Okay, no big deal. So how do we release it? How do we release the sort of like the responsibility of like believing it's because of us, believing it's because of our worth, believing it's because, you know, they saw something in us that was like a defect or something like that, right? We need to actually avoid the tendency to overanalyze and try to understand why someone did it. Even in a breakup, that pull we have towards trying to understand and feeling like, well, if only I understood, then I could have closure, is not a real thing. It doesn't really happen even in a breakup, because generally the person breaking up with us doesn't usually have the self-awareness and understanding to communicate what their part of the breakup was. Generally, that's not how that works. Generally, what happens, at least with the women that I'm working with, is that they are growing and they are evolving and they are understanding what their value is on a really deep level. And so they're just not really a match to that person anymore. And then we will see the person that they were with, usually just ends up kind of acting out in some way because they can feel that it's not a match anymore. They can feel that she's going on without them. And they don't have an honest conversation about it with her. They just kind of act out because they don't feel like, they don't kind of feel worthy of her. And so it can be really painful for her because that's not what it looks like to her, to her. So to her, it can just look like she's being rejected, which can be a really difficult thing. So we want to be able to reframe it and release it. And one of the greatest ways to do that, one of the easiest ways to do that, is through EFT. Because with EFT, we can just do some quick energy healing on our own. And it's a great pattern interrupter. So when we have these thoughts, when we're really seeking closure, when we're thinking about closure and all of this kind of stuff, usually that is, those are obsessive thoughts, right? That we're trying to get rid of, that we're trying to release, but we get stuck in a loop. So a really great way to break that pattern is to do some EFT. So if you're feeling like you still have some kind of energy, some kind of residue from being ghosted, let's do some EFT right now to help clear that out. So EFT, just as a quick overview, is energetic healing that you can do for yourself that accesses different energy points on your body, and it combines that. The kind of EFT that I do is clinical EFT, so it's supported by empirical research and studies. It's used for PTSD, it's used for weight loss, it's used for anxiety, it's used for insomnia, it's used to help you stop smoking, all these kinds of things. It's well researched and documented, and it combines energetic healing with aversion therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. So let's do some right now really, really quickly together. And what I want you to do first is I want you to take responsibility, full responsibility for your healing and your participation in your healing, and only participate in this healing if you consent to take responsibility for what comes up for you and what might happen for you. So the first thing that we want to do is to kind of tap in with that feeling of being ghosted. And I want you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in and get a sense of where you might feel it in your body when you think about being ghosted, when you remember a time of being ghosted that was particularly hurtful or that really stung for you. I want you to tap into that in your body, kind of see if you can get an idea of where it is in your body. And once you've done that, I want you to give it a number on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of its intensity. So 1 is the least intense, doesn't really bother me that much. 10 is the most intense. The most intense, like it still brings tears to your eyes to think about it. You try to avoid thinking about it because it does unsettle you emotionally, that kind of a thing. And then once you have that number, you don't have to write it down. You can just make a gentle note of it in your mind. Okay, and now we're going to start tapping about it. So the first place we tap is the side of the hand point. So we're going to tap here, and you can just repeat what I'm saying out loud and tap along with me. Even though I feel rejected because he ghosted me, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though his silence makes me question my worth, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I am hurt and confused by his disappearance, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Okay, and then the next point we're going to tap is your eyebrow. You can do that with 2 fingers, and it's this inner corner of your eyebrow right here. You can say, this hurt feels like rejection. And now we're going to go to the side of the eye right here. So you want to think about right there. And you're going to say, it feels like I wasn't enough. And now you're going to tap the top of the cheek, just right under your eye, and say, it hurts that he just disappeared. And now you're going to go right under your nose, so you're right in the groove. I am holding on to this pain. Now you're going to go to your chin, just right under your lips. And you're going to say, but I'm ready to release it now. And now you're going to tap on your collarbone. So you actually go to your collarbone and then go about 1 inch under it. And you're going to say, his silence is not about my worth. And now you're going to tap the broad, we call it the bra strap spot, but it's right under your armpit kind of. And it is right on your bra strap area. So you'll say, I don't need to carry this anymore. And then you can go to the top of your head. So imagine that you were a marionette with a string that was going straight up through the middle. And that's where you're going to tap. And you're going to say, I choose to let go and move forward with love. And now you're going to put your hand to your heart. Take a nice deep breath. And you're going to say, I am lovable, I am worthy, and I only want those who are capable of showing up for me. Take a nice big deep breath. Let it out. And you can say, I am open and ready to be loved by a good man who is right for me. Okay. So remember that ghosting. Oh, one quick thing. Check in now with that number. Check in with that number. See what it is now. Check in with it in your body. See what that number is now. And ask yourself, did it go up, down, stay the same? Most of the time it goes down. But ask yourself, did it go up, did it go down, did it stay the same? And what you can do is, you can rewind this on the replay and go through the tapping again. If it's not a 1 or a 2, and you can bring it down to a 1 or a 2. Once you get it down, the intensity of that feeling down to a 1 or a 2, it will usually dissipate the rest of the way down to a 0 after a sleep cycle. And drink lots of water, because with energy healing, our body needs water to integrate what's going on in energy with what's going on in our physical body. You know, our body goes, whoa, something happened, and I don't have a physical explanation for why it happened. What the heck? And water really helps with the process of healing and integrating that. All right. So remember that ghosting does not mean that you are not lovable. It means that that person was not capable of showing up for you in the way that you needed. And that is important information for you to have. Okay? So when we are dating, what do we need to do to kind of inoculate ourselves from like the pain of being ghosted, right? And we don't want to have our guard up all the time, because we want to be able to be open, right? But what do we do? How do we move when we're dating? How do we move in that energy, in the energy that we want to be in? One of the things that I like to share with my clients is this idea of keeping your heart still and your eyes open, right? Sometimes we see red flags and we try to avoid them. We try to ignore them, right? We see them, but we try to rationalize them away. And when we do that, we're doing half of the work for this person who is going to most likely reject us or not be a good match, right? Not be somebody that we would want to choose. We don't have to put our thumb on the scale so that we can justify being with somebody who's not good for us, right? Instead, we want to keep our heart still and keep our eyes open and believe what we are seeing. Believe what you are seeing. Don't try to talk yourself out of it, okay? So often what will happen in those situations is like we need to be paying attention to things like consistency. Consistency will show us who a person is, and consistency is something we can only see over time, right? So we're looking for things like, are there regular calls? Are there regular texts? Is there follow through, right? Before we start thinking of ourselves as like, I am with this person, right? And we also want to think of it like, I am seeing if this person is the kind of person I can have a friendship with. You know, one of the things that helps a lot with dating is if we're very clear, we communicate very clearly, like, yes, I am looking for a partner, or I would like to be with a partner, but first I would just like to have friends, to expand my friendship, my friend circle, right? What I'm looking for is, even if we don't hit it off, if we're not a match, I would hope that we can still be friends, that we can be in each other's worlds, that, you know, if I know somebody I can connect you with, that you would be okay with that, and vice versa, you know. And not even like someone I can connect you with romantically, but like if I see, you know, if I see somebody who is looking for something that you do, you know, I would want to connect them. If I know that somebody who's in like your favorite TV show or something like that, and, you know, I'd want to be able to still connect you, even if like I'm not romantically interested in you, right? Those kinds of things. We want to be able to still be in goodwill with each other, even if it doesn't, you know, lead to anything, right? So you might want to communicate that kind of in the earlier stages and just be like, right now, I am really looking for people that I can develop deep friendships with, and then we can see where that goes. And even if it doesn't go to romance, I'm hoping we can still be friends and be in each other's lives, because I would love to expand my friend circle and be able to connect the people that I know in ways that are really beneficial for them, you know, and I'd hope that you would want to do the same, you know. So it's not about chasing, it's not about guessing, it's about letting someone prove their readiness through consistency, right? And one of the ways to really remember that is to keep your heart still and your eyes open. And when you see certain behaviors, believe what you are seeing, you know, and I would even say, believe what you are seeing over what you are hearing, especially if you are a person whose love language is words of affirmation. Because there are plenty of people who have figured out specific things to say, you know, specific things to say to make it sound like you have a future together and that they are uniquely interested in you, right? And you want to be able to really see the difference between them saying those things and what they actually do in real life, right? So let's talk about something that is a big deal that always happens with ghosting. It's like almost 100% of the time. I would say this happens. Sometimes a ghost circles back. So let's talk about reasons why a ghost might circle back. So, you know, they don't always stay gone. Sometimes whatever they're chasing, it didn't work out for them. And so they circle back. They want to see what's going on with you. And a lot of times they're thinking, well, I didn't officially reject her, so maybe she's not mad at me, right? Because in their minds, they're like, well, I didn't break up with you. And there is some truth to that, because women often date as though they're in a relationship, and men date as though they're dating. And what I mean by that is that dating is just the process of getting to know someone. Right? It's just figuring out, like, do we have stuff in common? You know, I'm going to let you know things about me. You're going to let me know things about you. We're going to see if there's a chemistry. We're going to see if, like, we want to go out again. You know, that's all we really need to know on the first date is, do we want to go out again? We don't need to know, like, is this person going to be the person for my whole future? Are they the person? Right? But a lot of times women will, like I said, kind of look for reasons to fall in love with someone and feel like we're in a relationship with them, even though it's just been one date. Now, relationships are exclusive and they are committed, and they happen when monogamous relationships are exclusive and committed. There are all different kinds of relationships that work for different kinds of people, but let's just say monogamous relationships are exclusive and committed. So a lot of times we will assume we're in a relationship, right? And not have had the conversation. If you have not actually had the conversation in your language that you both speak, clearly, verbally, and had an agreement, we are exclusive. I don't want to see anyone else. Do you want to see anyone else? No, I don't want to see anyone else either. Great, let's be exclusive, right? Whoever initiates it, right? If you haven't had the conversation, do not assume it is exclusive. Because in the other person's eyes, you might just be dating. And dating is not exclusive. And dating is not committed. Dating is just getting to know somebody. Okay? So a lot of times men understand that and women do not. Women feel like if I like you and we've gone out the first time, we're in a relationship. No, that's not the case. So don't, and a lot of times that is actually to our detriment, not just because the other person isn't thinking about being committed to us, but because we have prematurely committed to someone that we don't know, and that's not good for us. You know, you are not, second-rate goods that need to be sold in a hurry. That's an old saying, and that's probably not. Hopefully it translates. So value yourself and don't overcommit to a relationship with someone where you think you're in a relationship and you don't actually know this person very well yet. Don't do that. It always benefits the other person and it never benefits you. So wait. Get to know what you're doing. You need to gather enough information to decide if you want to commit, and then that conversation needs to happen out loud. And the gathering enough information part takes time. Often it can take 2 to 3 months of time. You're gathering information. That's okay. That's great. Go on dates. Don't just be hanging out at each other's houses, watching TV, and having sex. Go out. Get to know this person. Learn about this person. Do fun things with this person. Do friend things with this person. Get to know each other. Date. So, okay, what happens when ghosters come back? So they're often thinking like, okay, well, I didn't officially reject her, so maybe she's not mad at me. This is how some men think. I don't know what to tell you, but it's true. And usually the message, the comeback message is like months later, and it's usually like at night, because he's probably bored or he's horny or, he's feeling the sting of like a recent rejection, right? Like that night. And the timing is really like a giveaway, right? Because he's reaching out at a time that is convenient for him, but weird for you. You're like, why would I get this text at this time of night and he would think I'm available? That's super weird, right? And it's like a test, right? He's testing you to see if you'll give him access again. So if you respond, here's the kicker. If you respond like you're really angry and you just unload, like you haven't texted me and you didn't go out with me again, I didn't even know what was going on. If you do all that, then he'll ghost you and feel justified. He'll feel like, well, she was crazy, and he'll tell everybody she was crazy. And it's really best to just be really brief and dignified and final, like keep it classy and keep it moving. So you don't have to have long drawn out conversations. You don't have to have a bunch of explanations. You just want to respond and block and move forward. So things he might say are things like, hey, stranger, or I've been thinking about you, or I'm sorry that I got busy. Do you want to catch up? Or are you up? You up? you know, and things that you can respond with. You can just say, I'm not interested. Take care. Bless and block, right? Thanks for reaching out, but I've moved on. I'm not available. Wishing you the best. You know, deuces. So it's important to just remember, like, when a ghost comes back, just remember, like, ghosts are supposed to stay dead. They're dead for a reason. Let them stay dead, you know. So I had a client once who was like, well, we had a really great date, but then he vanished, you know, and I thought it was me. But as soon as I realized that his silence wasn't actually about me, then I was able to just like let it go. And that shift in my energy helped me attract someone who was emotionally available. Because the thing is, if we keep thinking, oh, it's something about me, and holding on to that energy and like obsessing about being ghosted, we're going to attract more experiences where we're being ghosted. So we really have to deal with that energy and let it go. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you think about the most. Because what you think about the most is what imprints kind of like in your energy, in your aura. What you think about the most is what you're going to attract to you. That's what you feel like an energy equivalent to other people, whatever you're thinking about the most. So we want to be able to clear those things out. So one sort of note that I want to make is because of that, because our energy matters, it's important for us not to ghost other people either. So I know that sometimes, and this is very unique for women as opposed to men, we can feel like it might be unsafe to tell somebody that we're not interested in seeing them anymore because he might respond in anger, or he might get hostile, he might get aggressive, because some men are just wild out here in terms of how they respond to a no, right? I mean, and we've seen some of the videos, but I'm sure some of us have experienced it in the flesh. You know, we've probably experienced it in real life. I know I have, you know, many times of like saying, no, I'm not interested, you know, no thanks, whatever, and had somebody be angry with me, right? Because patriarchy is a real thing. And there are some men who even might think that they are enlightened, you know, and think that they are feminist and think that they're whatever, and still get angry because they felt like they were entitled to your attention, or that they felt like they were entitled to you in some way. And when you don't give them that, they can get angry in response, right? So if you need to tell someone as a text, in a text, that's perfectly fine. You know, my thing is that even in a text, you can be short and honest and kind, right? So one of the things that I just advise my clients to just say this, and I'll have them like write it down so they can copy paste, especially if they're doing online dating, is they can say, you know, thanks for the opportunity to spend time together. I don't think it's going to be a match, but you're a great guy. Take care. You know, it's like it's crystal clear that you're not going to be spending time with that person, and you will feel good about what you said if you ever run into them later. You know, so we're just keeping it short, kind, honest, classy, moving on, right? Generally, somebody will maybe, you know, people appreciate, like, put yourself in their shoes. If it's like a good person and it just wasn't a match, he will appreciate that you didn't string him along, right? Because you're not wanting to waste your time, you're not wanting to waste his time. And it's great if you just, you know, you're putting out the energy that you want to receive back, which is that you want to be treated with kindness, even if it's not a match. You want clarity, even if it's not a match, right? You want the person to show like a basic level of care and decency, even if it's not a match, right? So that's what we want. So remember, ghosting is really painful. It can be really painful, but it does not define you in any way. And the silence that you get back is information. It's important. It helps you make your choice. It helps you sort, right? Because you're like, okay, that's not something that I want more of in my life. And it also helps you because you can go back and go, okay, what are some possible red flags that might have tipped me off in advance about this being a possibility, right? Did he tell me stories about other relationships that didn't work out that well for him? Does he seem like somebody that's not particularly committed to a life path? Does he seem like somebody who's not particularly ambitious? Does he think it's funny? Like, what are the quality of his jokes, right? Does he think it's funny to like disappoint someone? Does he tell? Because a lot of times you will actually get so much information if you listen to what's happening, if you listen to what is being said and you believe it, and you don't just go, oh, he probably just meant this, ha ha ha. No, like actually pay attention, listen. People will tell you in the first 5 minutes who they are so often, we just need to pay attention and believe them. So when you have had this experience, when you've been ghosted, especially if you've been ghosted a few times, right? Then you can carry this energy of fear around being ghosted, or anger or resentment. You can start to have these beliefs that are like, all men are like this, online dating is like this, all whatever. And that's not true. Those are just limiting beliefs, but they start to shape your reality. They start to shape the choices you make, and they start to shape what you see. They start to shape what you notice in the world, and they start to shape what you attract to you. So what we want to do is clear those wounds out. We want to heal those wounds and clear the limiting beliefs. And the best way that we can do that is you can download my ebook, The Heartache Cure, at theheartachecure.com. It's free. You can read through it. You can help to heal those things. If you need a deeper level of healing, you can go to my audio program, which is the Overnight Heartache Cure, because you listen to it as you're falling asleep at night, and it helps you to be able to heal and release those beliefs. So to get to that, you can go to overnightheartachecure.com. These links are in my bio too, so you can check them out. You can also book a free intro session with me so that we can get clarity about what the obstacles are in your love life. We can get really, really clear on exactly what it is that you want to create. And believe me, that is more difficult sometimes for us to do on our own than we think. I was working with a client today who almost like a nice chunk of her love list was things she didn't want. And she's now going back so she can reframe that into things that she does want. So it can be very difficult, even if you are... my clients, the women that I work with, are brilliant women, brilliant, successful, caring, amazing sense of humor, just like great people, right? But it's still, sometimes love is still tricky. Having the success we have in love can sometimes be trickier than the success we have in other areas of our lives. And so we just need to tag somebody in who can walk that path with us and help us with those things, because that's what they do. That's what I do. So, you can book a free